All right. Can you turn it on? All right. We're going to get started. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I thought we served breakfast. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Once more. All right. All right. Good. Good. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I'm Vivek. I'm one of the founders and CEO of HackerRank. This is our 9th main edition and second in Palo Alto. So an interesting trivia, we actually started Main in Palo Alto 2 years back, and we had 10 people attending the event. We decided to call it a meetup because it was not really an event. And since then, we have grown. So today, there are about 150 people here, and we also have a live stream at HackerRank.tv. You can watch me live here. You don't have to go there. And we have about 300 to 350 viewers, including my mom, who's in India. Thank you for staying up. I do hope our internet works. I hope I'm not buffering. So it's been great to see the growth of Maine. We do this across different cities. We did this in February in New York, today in Palo Alto. Next week, we're going to London. So it's amazing to see the community come together. All right, so one of the things that we have actually strived to do in the main agenda or the event is to have like a good balance between the vision of where the technical recruiting industry is going to what needs to happen right now, which is more of a practitioner approach. So that's how we have crafted today's agenda as well. So let me walk through what we're going to do. We're going to kick off with my keynote, match every developer to the right job. I'm hoping you're all looking forward to my keynote. Yes, no, okay, I can't change the agenda now. So you have to look forward to it. And it's going to be followed by Oded, who's our SVP of product at HackerRank. So as I'm going to walk through the slides, you can think of me as walking through the slides and Oded actually telling you how you can convert the slides, best practices into action. That's going to be followed up by Javahar, who's our SVP of engineering at HackerRank. We did a lot of research on Gen Z. The era of millennials is over, as you probably know. Now, if you thought millennials were interesting, quirky, weird to manage, I'm a millennial myself. People label me a lot, so it's totally fine. Well, welcome to the world of Gen Z. Let's see what's in store. So we did a lot of research, and we're going to walk through some of the insights that we actually gained on what the Gen Z folks look forward to. It's going to be followed up with a panel led by Gaurav, who's our SVP of Customer Success at HackerRank. We have great speakers. We have Brian Powell, who's the VP of Talent Acquisition at Twilio. We have Aubrey, who's Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Atlassian. And Aubrey is, I've been a huge fan. I would say, she's been a diversity champion, not just within Atlassian, but in Silicon Valley, maybe across the globe. So big fan of the work. And Brian, I've known Brian for actually over 6 years. We actually started this company 6 years back when he was at VMware. VMware was our one of our first 10 customers, and he helped us get into VMware. Thank you, Brian. And we worked with Brian over 6 years at WordPress, Twilio. I can't ask more from you. So thank you and welcome. Then we're going to wrap up with a fireside chat with Gail. Gail is the author of Cracking the Code Interview. It's the #1 book in the interviewing category in Amazon. So a lot of you might have been familiar with the book. So it's the #1 book. So we're going to wrap up with a fireside chat. That is not supposed to happen. That's not in the demo script. Do you want to fix it? It's not happening? OK. All right, just so you know, Sharp is not our customer. We're trying to get them on board. Hopefully, they can fix it. All right, did he just restart? Yeah, that's the standard solution. Totally works everywhere. Yeah, the one thing that I've learned studying computer science is just restart works. Amazing. So we're going to wrap up with a fireside chat. So that's what we're going to do over the next 2 hours. It's a packed agenda, great speakers, and I would say success for this meeting would be if each of you can take anywhere between 1 to 3 takeaways that you can go ahead and implement in your recruiting process to a strong outcome. That would be a great success. So let's get started. Oh, we do have networking and lunch. Lunch is great, by the way. I'm supposed to say that. No, I think it's really, really great. So success would be 1 to 3 takeaways and networking and lunch. All right. So our mission of the company, our mission is to match every developer to the right job, with the underlying driver being skill over pedigree. So this is why we actually started the company. So it doesn't matter which school you went to, which company you worked at before. What matters is, do you have the skills to do the job or not? And we try to build our products, the way we build products, the way we hire people, and how we operate as a company. We operate with this underlying principle. So we started this 6 years back. And over the last 6 years, we have transformed the recruiting process for over 1,500 customers across the globe. And we have assessed over 5 million developers. That's about 20% of the world's developer population, and who have cumulatively taken about 21 million challenges on our platform. So right now, we have like one interview that happens every 8 seconds. So that's the scale at which it happens. So some developer somewhere in the world is attempting a company's interview or an assessment every 8 seconds. So that's the scale at which we operate. And we work with a lot of different customers, small, medium, large, across different industries. And we're all from Silicon Valley, so you're probably familiar with the term of every company is becoming a software company, every industry is becoming a software industry. So we're actually seeing the transformation live. And one of the most fun parts of my job that I really enjoy is to go and meet customers and solve problems. That's actually the most fun part that I really enjoy. And I do a lot of customer visits. I ask them what's working, what's not working, how is HackerRank helping you, what can we do better? So there's a lot of work that I do on that. So over the last maybe 3 to 6 months, I've been asking the standard question in all of my customer visits. What are the top 2 roles that are super hard to fill, super hard to hire? And hard because there is intense competition, because you don't have enough people, you can't source well, you can't interview well, for whatever definition of hard, what are the top 2 roles? Well, the first answer that people gave was I'm paraphrasing this, was some level of principal engineers, architects, senior engineers, super hard to hire. It's very hard, there are not enough people, it's hard to interview. Now, that sounded obvious. Any guess on what was a close second? Machine learning? Okay. Systems engineer? Any other? Data scientist? Okay. It was really surprising to me. It was new grads. Yeah. It was surprising to me. It's not surprising to you for sure. Yeah. So you were probably one of the customers that I should have talked to. But it's amazing to see the competition is so fierce and intense in new grad. And I remember talking to this recruiter who worked at Netflix about 4 years back. She's not at Netflix now. And she was sharing a story. There was an intern, not even a new grad, who was contemplating between joining Google and Netflix. And he had competing offers, and this person is trying to sell this candidate really hard. You should come and work at Netflix. You watch Netflix every day. If there's a bug, you can come here and fix it. It's going to make it better. You're selling really hard. And now he's starting to lean more towards joining Netflix, and then he gets a call. He gets a call from Larry Page from Google. He gets a call from Larry Page convincing him, no, you use Google more than Netflix every day, and here are the technologies. Of course, he ended up taking Google. It would have been a complete anticlimax if he chose Netflix. He ended up joining Google. Unbelievable. And this is a real story. And then we started to learn more. We started to research more on why is this competition intense. And then we realized that the upside that you get when you hire a great new grad is just unbelievable. It's just out of the world. It's like 100x. And let me share a few stories. She's Austin Guide. Anybody familiar? Remember her name? Yeah? Are you from Uber? Okay, makes sense. Yeah. You might have seen her name come up. She joined Uber as an intern in marketing and customer support. She joined as a marketing customer support specialist. And over the last 8 years, has grown tremendously and now manages the entire operations for Uber's ATG, the Autonomous Division Unit. And she also got to ring the bell when Uber went public. That's the best perk you can offer your interns. Right? It's an unbelievable growth story from an intern to actually managing all of the operations. This is closer to home. He's Shiv. He works at HackerRank. He was one of our first engineers at HackerRank. I say one of our first because there were two people who joined on the same day. We don't know who came to the office first. There were two engineers. And he actually doesn't know that I'm even going to share the story, so don't worry, Shiv, I'm not going to embarrass you. But Shiv joined as an intern, went back, graduated college, joined as a full stack developer in Bangalore, built our core product of whatever you see right now, moved to the US, kicked off our engineering team building here, wanted to learn data engineering, and now actually manages the data engineering team, and the dashboards and the data that you actually see within our product is managed by his team. Huge throughput that you can actually get. She's Julie Joe. She started at Facebook when they were about a couple of hundred employees and grew really quickly over the last 8 to 9 years. And now she's the VP of Design and Code Growth, Code Design and Growth, and manages 250 people. She joined Facebook when they were 200 and now manages a team of 250 employees. And there are so many different stories that I can actually share about this, but you get the point that the upside that you get when you hire a great new grad is just out of the world. It's 100x. But what are they looking for? I know Jawahar is going to cover a lot of it, so I'm going to just give you a sneak peek. What are Gen Z folks looking for? And we sliced and diced this data by different things. We actually did a great survey. We did a great research across the board. And one of the insights that I'm going to share, and this is sliced by Gen Z women, they value employer brand 2x more than any of the previous generations. An employer brand, by the way, is not your billboard on 101 or your logo or anything of the sort. When we actually dug in deeper, employer brand is what are your company values? What are your principles? What are your ethics? Do you actually stay true to them? What do you actually do? They're pretty intense, Gen Z, right? They care about a lot of these things. And the other interesting thing that we actually saw in comparison to the previous generation is interesting problems to solve. Now, it's not enough if you just tell me that you're hiring a data scientist. I mean, everybody's hiring a data scientist. Everybody's hiring a machine learning engineer. Everyone is hiring a front-end full stack engineer. What are the problems that I will actually be working, and why is it unique? Why is a full stack developer or a machine learning engineer unique in your company? So there's a lot of changes that are actually starting to happen. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how customers use this insight in their recruiting process. So the first example that I want to share is Etsy. People familiar with Etsy? Yeah? OK. So for those of you who don't, Etsy is a marketplace for hand-curated goods, jewelry, clothing, a lot of different accessories, beautiful website. And they care about craft. OK, that's the principle, that's the value that they stand by. And everything that they do across the board on their interview recruiting process all originate with the word craft. So let me give you a simple example. Their blog, their engineering blog, is called Code as Craft. They view software engineering as craft. And you go to that Code as Craft, you should actually check it out. It talks about what will you do as a new grad? What will you do when you actually join? What are the tools that we actually build? We think of software engineering as craft. When they create an assessment or a challenge on HackerRank, they give a real-world challenge, and they just don't care about whether you complete the code, whether you write the right code or not, but is it of good quality? Do you actually care about what you wrote? And that's what they're actually assessing in the interview process. So there is a constant underlying string of coding as a craft, and that we care about craftsmen across the board, right from the website throughout the interview process. Makes for a wonderful candidate experience. The second example that I want to share is Twitter. People familiar with Twitter? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And one of the really interesting counterintuitive things I would actually say that they do is in their process. Similar to Etsy, they give a real-world challenge. But here's the catch. They actually give 7 days for the candidate to solve the challenge. And now that might sound counterintuitive. Isn't it going to turn off people? 7 days is a long duration. What's going to happen? Ironically, developers just really love it, because I'm not under the time pressure of solving this in 60 minutes or 120-minute interview. This is a real-world challenge. This is what I would be working on Twitter. And when I come and join Twitter, you're not going to give me a task and say, you need to complete this in 60 minutes. It's going to be a little ambiguous, and go ahead and solve it. So people almost, it's like a flight simulator. Like people actually learn of what does it take, what does it feel to be working at Twitter during the challenge. So these are like a couple of examples where companies talk a lot about the values and instill those values throughout the interview process. And so we dug deeper, we analyzed more. We have done, just over the last 18 months, we have done over 1 million student interviews on our platform. That's not supposed to happen. It's just 1 million. It's not like if it's going twice, it's not going to be 2 million. It might go once more, but we just did one. I'm not touching. So we did over 1 million student interviews over the last 18 months. And OK, let's stop. And we have done a lot of research. And we actually identified what are the skills that you need to be assessing new grads. But that's probably something that you all are familiar. But which universities have those skills? So we broke the skill rubric into 5 components. Problem solving, which is the ability for you to convert the idea that you have in your head to code. Language proficiency, are you really strong in a particular language? Data structures, these are the building blocks of what are you actually using to build your project. Core computer science knowledge, this includes everything from your algorithms to operating systems to networking. And of course, soft skills, like can I actually work with you? This is a common rubric that we have actually found that companies use it across the board. And the 1 million student interviews is across 350 universities across 46 different countries. So we're going to release a report mid-June that is going to not only tell you how to assess for these skills, but which universities you can actually go and find the best problem solvers, the best language proficiency, which university actually produces great Python developers, and where do you actually need to focus. And just so you know, there are 4,000 universities that have a CS course in North America. 4,000. We all visit maybe 20, maybe 25 at best. And guess what? Everybody is visiting the same 20 or 25, whether you're a Series A company or you're Google. So this research is going to unveil like where are the skills that are present across North America for you to optimize your recruiting process. Now it's super easy to make slides, to make beautiful slides, but to convert this into practice is hard. And so I like to give hard jobs to my executive team. So following this, I'd like to get Oded, who's going to talk about how to convert these best practices into the product. Welcome, Oded. Come on. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivek, for the great overview. Before jumping into the product, into the hard part, I want to share some insight that we've learned over the years on specifically what are the core challenges that we've observed when you hire from universities. And we think of it as 3 specific challenges. Like it's hard to hire a developer, but it's actually even harder to hire from universities. The first one is all resumes look almost the same. We use those resumes or LinkedIn profiles to screen students. If someone has 10, 15 years of experience, you can really see like what they do, what they like doing, and so forth. When you look at a student's resume, it's just classes. GPA classes, some internship. It's very hard to screen and to make a decision just based on those files. The second challenge is that although most students are coming inbound to your site, to your career fair, the quality and the quantity of those students do depend on your tech brand. And the challenge here is mostly applicable for companies who are not tech traditional. Like everyone needs a developer, everyone try to hire programmers, but how do you make sure your tech brand goes throughout the process, you have a strong tech brand, and those who come to you know what to expect from the company. And the third challenge is how to keep hiring managers happy. We all know it's hard. I'm a hiring manager myself. I'm sure it's not that easy to satisfy me, but when it comes to dealing with the high quantity and quality and the challenge of filtering and finding the right students, how do you actually make those hiring managers happy with the overall students and the candidates? So now let's look into best practices in the product. What you see here is obviously a fictitious company called Hacker Burgers. The mission is to match every hungry developer to the right burger. I hope it sounds a bit familiar with some other companies' mission. And what you see, this is a career page. And this company, although it sells food, its core business depends on technology. And since it depends on the technology, it needs to hire strong developers. So there is a job post here for university graduates asking for those to apply for full stack developers. What I've done here, as soon as the students click the Apply Now button, the first thing I will ask this student to do, and by the way, this is live, everything is connected here. The first thing I would ask this student to do is to complete a coding challenge. And I would like to make it the first thing, but I would like my assessment to be based on skills, based on the ability of those students to go and address the needs that I'm looking for. Another thing you can see throughout, although this is a HackerRank experience, it can be branded to what the company needs. You can have the picture. Those are the happy students for HackerBurger. You can see the logo here. You can customize the text. The experience can flow directly from the career page into our product. So now, since I'm not a very good developer myself, I would like to ask Dan to join us now. Dan? So Dan is going to demo as a student here, and just to the context here, everyone can apply. So this currently we're practicing it from the same room. I'm going to talk to them, but that can be in any other state. And that's Dan to apply for that specific position.
Thank you, Oded. So I actually saw the posting when I was doing some job searching, and I actually took the test and applied for the position. I'm excited to hear what the next step is.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. So as a recruiter, I live and breathe ATS. In this case, I'm going to demo the next step in Greenhouse, as you can see here. But the integration that I'm going to demo is actually available in other ATSs as well. So I see that Dan just applied. I'm going to click on Dan as a candidate. And Dan's application is going to be here. You can see like the name, the email, the resume. Everything is typical to an application. But what's unique about this integration is what you can see below is Dan actually submitted, a solution to the coding challenge, and he scored it. He received 100. Good job, Dan.
Thank you.
Now, if I want to dive deeper into the code itself, there is a link here. The link can show me the code, the test cases, like how do you approach it, and so forth. Me as a recruiter, I'm doing this like screening. I'm looking at the resume. I like what I'm seeing. They're obviously like getting 100 is like as good as it gets. I want to move him to the next step. So what I'm going to do here now, I'm going to click Smooth Stage. And before moving him, I do want to provide some overview of the funnel that I've created. Since I've asked Dan or students to just apply with a coding challenge, which means I can assess their skills very early on in the process, I can have a very simple funnel. The first one is a code screen score review. That's what I just did. I reviewed the score that was submitted. The next one I'm going to jump into is a remote code per session. What's important about remote, it can be done with any other candidate in any other state or even other country by using the technology we call code pair. Then if Dan is going to pass that, he can move to a face-to-face and an offer. So let's move to a remote coding session. I'm going to schedule an interview now. So let's set the time for now. So the 23rd, let's start at 10. And let's create a code per link. Calling into the HackerRank platform, generate a link. This is a link unique for a session between me and the candidate. And let's invite an interviewer. In this case, it's going to be me. And send the invitation. So what just happened now, me as a recruiter, I move the students based on the score into the next step. The next step is a technical interview done remotely. More remote than this, can be done like over the phone, over a video call, and allow this technical person to assess the skills of the developer. So let's go into my calendar. Refresh my calendar. You can see an interview I just added. The first link in the interview is a link to a code per session. So now the technical interviewer is jumping into the code per session, and Dan is there as well. You see Oded and Dan, two users on this interactive shared session. Now there are two use cases here. Some hiring manager would like to start with a blank page. This is a blank page, giving a coding challenge and starting to write code and assess the code. But what we provide, mostly for efficiencies, is the ability for the hiring manager now, the technical person, to jump directly into the code that was already written by Dan. So I'm going to do an import question. I'm going to look at the candidate test. So Dan already completed a solution for a problem of computing a HackerBurger bill. So that's code that was written already. Sometimes, as Vivek said, it's a week long. It takes a few hours. It has lots of context. So I'm going to use this question for my interactive session with Dan. And we just loaded. This is code was loaded in the system. You see the question here on the right, and then you can see the code was written in the middle of the screen. So what the question is about computing the bill for a specific order. Again, like it's important for companies to create challenges that are very close to what developers will do at their job once they join. And that's part of your tech brand. So in this case, I want to calculate the bill. Every burger is $5. Every fries is $3. So let's look at the inputs here. Okay, so this bill is for 2 burgers and 1 fries. And let's run the test and see whether the code actually worked. How much should it be then?
It should be 13.
Good job. Okay, good job. Code
right.
worked. Okay, now since this is not an interactive session, now I'm going to actually ask Dan to make it a bit more complex. Then I would like to apply a discount today.
So discount on the total bill or the burgers, the fries, how would you like me to
Let's
do
apply
this?
it on the burgers only.
Sure, I can do that. What percent discount would you like?
Let's see 15% for today.
15%? Okay, so I'm going to do that by multiplying 0.85 times the number of burgers times 5. And I'm just going to apply it to that section.
Great, let's run it.
Sure. So I'm going to click Run Test on my machine over here.
Great,
And,
11.5. Thank you very much, Dan. So again, this is an interactive session. We share the same context. When Dan types on his computer, remote, out of state, I see it on my screen as well. I can ask questions. I can make the problem more complex. And what we are seeing by working with customers, when hiring managers use this flow, they actually move for an hour interview to something way shorter, something 20 minutes or 30 minutes, because they can grab lots of context from the coding screen that was done already and dive directly into the skill and the challenge that they would like to assess. Thank you very much, Dan. You passed that as well.
Great. Thank you.
So just to summarize, this is a typical funnel that you see and you have for overall for tech hiring. What I've showed here is connecting overall the process order from the career site into a HackerRank test, into your ATS, and then continuing into an interactive session. It allowed me to move from sourcing to screening very efficiently. I was able to screen based on score and based on skills. And once I screened based on that, I actually moved very fast into a technical interview done remotely, in this case locally, and allowing the hiring manager to assess the skills, starting from the code that was written, and then diving deeper with more complex problems. So I'm going to be here for the rest of the day. This was just a glimpse of the product. We have obviously way more. We have a demonstration, and feel free to ask any more questions. And without any further ado, I do want to introduce Jawar, who can share more data on early talent.
Thank you, Oded. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people here. Welcome. So I'm going to talk, Vivek set the stage very nicely. He said it's really hard to hire early grad, new college grad people. It's going to get harder if you don't understand the new generation of people who are coming into the workplace. So we conducted research. We surveyed more than 10,000 student developers. And based on that, we kind of analyzed the results. And what we're summarizing here is just a few key facts or insights that hopefully will help you, will be one of those 3 things that Vivek wants you to take away, and will help you tune your university hiring, your early talent, because the landscape is indeed changing. So as I was coming in here, I was reflecting on my own career of building teams. I've been working in the Valley for more than 25 years. You know, I've been at Netscape, Yahoo, a bunch of other companies where we've grown large teams. And both here as well as, you know, in Bangalore, HackerRank, again, we have a team in Bangalore, had teams in Shanghai, in Austin, in Boston, so lots of different places, done lots of university recruiting. And I'm kind of reflecting back and thinking, I'm also going to have to change how I respond to this new cohort of people coming into the workplace, right? The differences that you'll see that I'll talk about are somewhat subtle, but they're really important, right? And if you understand them, you can kind of get a competitive edge on the others and maybe get more of those folks hired and closed, okay? So let's begin the journey. So first question I had was, who are these people? Who are the Gen Z people? So they are people born, you know, in 1997 onwards, and If you do the math, we're in 2019, they're 22 years this year, so they're entering the workforce now, right? In fact, next month, you'll start to see some of those folks entering the workforce. They'll be there for 15 years. So you'll be working with this type of generation for 15 years. So you're at the very beginning. So what you learn now and you evolve will help you for the next 15 years, right? So, and they will represent about 32% of the world's population. That's projected, so it's a large number of people that you better understand. So again, going back to my own, sort of work that I've done in building teams, reflecting back and thinking, how many people have I interviewed? And I came up with like 7,000 or so interviews over building many teams. And the thing I learned, sort of reflecting back, was, what I've had to do in different markets and different times is to understand who I'm trying to recruit, and then relate to them, and then adapt my strategy to work well with them, right? So hopefully all the stuff we're going to cover here is going to actually help you also understand who these people are, what they're looking for, relate better to them, and then adapt what you're doing so that you can actually appeal to them and hire them, okay? One of the unique things about the Gen Z is that they're digital natives. So they've grown up with digital devices. Like my younger son has absolutely no idea what off-the-air broadcast television or radio or none of that stuff. I mean, it's just like, just rewind it, pause it. He doesn't understand, that there's something that's being broadcast and you cannot pause it, right? Because everything, they've just grown up with all this technology and they just don't have the understanding to go back to what some of us have grown up with, okay? So let's begin the journey. Let's try to understand. So the first thing we're going to look at is, how do these people learn how to code? I'm going to open it up to everyone here. Feel free to comment. How do you think they learn how to code? Yeah. In school, okay. That's true, yeah. Gaming, that's actually very, very true, yeah. YouTube. Sorry? YouTube, yes, self-taught YouTube. Yeah. Anyone else? Boot camp. Sorry? Boot camp. Oh, boot camp. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So many people go into boot camps to learn. They may not have CS degrees, and they're actually going into boot camp and learning and coming out into the workforce. So let's look at what our data tells us. Many of them are teaching themselves how to code. Okay? Large number, 27%, are exclusively self-taught. And also they're starting very early, right? If you look at from before 16 years of age, they actually know how to code. Okay? So this goes back to the digital native. The technology is very accessible. All the different tools, the YouTube, boot camps, apps on their iPad. Like yesterday evening, as I was looking to get ready for this, I said, okay, let me go search on the App Store for coding apps. There were more than 100 coding apps. And they're not just toys. They actually have full environments. Like you can do PHP, Kotlin, Java, JavaScript, Go. Go has this beautiful environment on the web. With everything you need is there, right? And if I look back to the time when I first learned how to code, it was Fortran and there was no computer available, right? Okay. And then when I got to Pascal and Lisp, I was fortunate enough to be in a university where I had a $150,000 workstation with Lisp on it, right? Symbolics Lisp, if anyone remember those machines. They're really expensive, but today a $300 iPad and you have the full environment, okay? So they're approaching technology in a very different way. So what does that actually mean when we're going out to universities? If you use your traditional matching techniques, okay, which university, what courses, you're probably going to miss out on that 27% of the population who are really good at coding, but they may not have all the credentials that you're trying to match against, right? So you really need to broaden and start focusing on skills and saying, what skills do they have? And what Oded just showed is a good example. Start with the skills, right? Tell them to do some coding and they can prove themselves. So there may be somebody who is not at the greatest university who actually completes that assessment, and you look at the code, and it happens to me all the time. I look at the code and I go, wow, this is amazing code. This person really knows what they're doing, and they're not from MIT or they're not from Caltech, and they're like really, really good. And I would love to have them on the team, right? So you got to open up and be broader in terms of people you're looking for. Okay? So moving on the journey, so languages, right? That's always an interesting one. We always care about people coming on the job and being able to get productive right away and know the right languages. So let's sort of open it up again. Like, what languages do you think they know? Python, okay, yeah. Sorry? JavaScript, very, very common, yeah. Python, JavaScript, any others? Java, SQL, yeah, those are all true. Okay, let's take a look at what the data said. This is a lot of different languages, and they seem to know most of them, right? And I would actually venture out to say that there's many individuals who know multiple languages. They don't know just one, they know many, right? Okay, and that's really great because our technology that we're building, like, you probably have heard of microservices architectures. Our technologies are now also very varied and diverse, and so you may have an architecture where something is written in Go and something is written in JavaScript and something is written in Java and in Ruby, and it's all mixed together, right? And so if you have developers who can actually work in different environments, that's actually a huge plus in the team, right? So this also is big. It's not too surprising because of those 100 apps. They probably cover all of those languages, right? And so people have it on their phones, and they can also gaming, I think, is another big driver. So very proficient, overqualified, right? And so how does that translate to when you're looking for people? For me, what that says is, look, I'm not really going to focus on any one language, right? If you know one, I know you can probably learn a few more. And in fact, many of them are probably going to know 2 or 3. So if I'm fixated on, do you know C++, I'm probably looking at the wrong thing, right? I should be saying, what do you know really well? And how can I take you on and get you trained on a bunch of other things, right? That makes sense? Okay, so let's continue on. Look at the next thing, which is, how much do they value diversity compared to their previous generation, who are the millennials, right? Open up here, anyone? More is good, yeah. Okay, so more. Okay, let's just say more. Let's see what the data says, okay? Significantly more, 2x, right? If you see the previous 3 generations, they are pretty level, and there's suddenly a big spike, okay, according to our data. So that's an amazing thing, actually, because in our tech work, the work we do, a lot of what we do is problem solving, right? In fact, that was the first skill that we had in what Vivek presented, problem solving, right? And it's actually been shown through studies that when you have a diverse workforce, the problem solving gets easier, okay? Because you have more points of view that come, you don't have everyone just homogeneous and everyone's thinking exactly the same way, which is probably what you'd end up with if you hired everybody from the same exact school. Because they all went to the same classes, they learned from the same teachers, the same TAs, the same professors, so they're all thinking the same way. And when you're trying to solve some hard problems, you want more diverse viewpoints. You want people with different life experiences, different points of view, so that you can actually come up with better solutions, to solve problems. So I think it's a great thing that they're actually asking for it. And I think we all should be building teams that are very diverse, right? And it's not just a checkbox thing. It's actually the culture needs to be there. Like, in my case, all my hiring managers know that we're trying to make the team more diverse. So they're more accommodating. We're actually thinking about how can we accommodate at every stage of the process, people who are coming from all different diverse backgrounds, right? And if you start to do that, then it becomes very genuine when you're actually reaching out and messaging to people that, we are very diverse. Our team is very diverse, right? Just, yeah.
Can I just ask you what those numbers are, the 8% and 4%? Is that the percentage of
of the people, yeah, who value diversity. Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. So I think the diversity piece is really integral to your culture, and it needs to be put out there. So in my case, when I'm going out to students, to this cohort of students, this is going to be a very important thing that I'm going to talk about, right? So let's look at the last one, which is how are their priorities different from, again, the previous cohort, which is the millennials? What do they prioritize higher, right? So what do you all think? Code pair? Culture, yes. Sorry, I was like code pair context. Yeah. Work-life balance. Culture, work-life balance. Any others? Financial stability. Okay, that's good. Those are all actually very, very good, but I think this is the data says something different. They care about growth, learning and development, and flexibility. And they care about challenging problems to work on, right? So this is, again, really nice because our technology landscape is changing all the time. And in fact, the rate of change is only accelerating as we're going along, right? What used to change every 12 months is now changing every 6 months, right? If you just went to, I was at the AWS Summit and also the Google Cloud Next, the amount of new stuff that is being introduced is mind-boggling, right? There's just new stuff coming out all the time, new ways of doing things, solving problems that you were solving in old ways, right? So you have to keep learning. So it's great because as an employer, I can offer a lot to them, right? It's also great because when they come in with all this knowledge and this desire to keep learning, they can actually help accelerate, us keeping up with all the change, right? So actually, it's very nicely aligned. They're also looking for challenging work. So in challenging work, I was just reflecting back yesterday, I was talking to a candidate, and they were asking about, what's challenging about the work at HackerRank. And so I was speaking on scalability, but I was able to talk about scalability in a slightly unique way as to, if there were 100,000 candidates taking a HackerRank test at the exact same time, what does that mean in terms of the technology? And so I'm giving you that example because if you can relate it to your business and kind of find a unique angle to talk about, then that appeals and that becomes a very challenging problem to talk about. Kind of light on time, so I'll move forward and conclude. So the first thing to take away from here is that you got to broaden, and focus on skills because you'll miss out that 27% if you just focus on the old traditional, I'm just going to look at these schools and these things on the resume, right? So broaden and focus more on skills. Foster diversity internally, make it much more than a checkbox, actually make it a core part of your team, and then make that visible externally, right? So then that'll really appeal to the people who are looking to join your teams. And then update your messaging to focus on their priorities, right? So the interesting thought experiment there was, what if you had your messaging and you invited maybe 10 of the Gen Z students who actually turned down your offers, right? And you invited them and you sort of tested your messaging on them and asked them why they didn't actually accept your offer. That would actually give you a lot of really detailed and very direct feedback on how to improve your messaging, right? So that was kind of an interesting thought we had yesterday was, in sales, people tend to do this closed loss analysis. What if you actually try to do that with this messaging as well? So I'll kind of wrap up there. I'll leave a minute. I think I'm out of time, but a minute for questions. And I'm also here, like Odette said, I'm here the rest of the day. So happy to answer questions then as well. Yeah.
I noticed in the graph that there was a significant drop in Gen Z's compensation expectations
Yes.
versus millennials.
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Okay, yeah. So the question was that there was a significant drop in Gen Z's compensation expectations. The question is, why do I think that is the case, right? That's a really good question. I don't have like a deeper insight than what the data says. I think maybe it's more that their focus is on a bunch of other things, which is I want to grow, and maybe if I'm just focused on growing, the compensation will actually follow. I think there's maybe an assumption, but I don't have any deeper thing on that other than it's just my opinion. I don't know, maybe some other folks have insights into that, yeah. They don't have any bills to pay. That's true. I'm also a parent. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's a better answer, right? Because yeah, I have a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, and it's like, okay, I'm still supporting him. So that'll come later in life to worry about the compensation piece. Yes. Yeah.
So one of the data that I found very fascinating is that they had C programming language
Yes.
rated really high.
Yes.
And you would imagine it was the case maybe 20 years ago.
Yes.
But what's your opinion on that?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I happened to be at IBM for a few years through an acquisition. In fact, it was pretty recently, 2012 to 2015. And I was blown away to think that COBOL and IBM CICS, which is like a really old transactional system, is still widely in use. Okay. Another story I'll give you is at Yahoo Mail Premium. We have millions of people paying us God knows how much money when there's Gmail available for free, right? Okay, with unlimited storage. So the point being that things don't change as quickly as we think. There's a whole lot of legacy stuff that just keeps going, right? And I think C is one of those. By the way, C is a great language, very, very simple and very systems. Go now is trying to replace that. But I think it's just widely used, right? Again, I'll go back to IBM Kix and COBOL. Lots of banking applications are still using that stuff. So my point being, like, things don't change that quickly, right? Yeah. Question? Yeah. Systems programming, yeah, in C, yeah. Go is trying to replace it. In fact, there hasn't been a great systems language after C, I'd say, other than Go now. Go is amazing, though. Yeah. Yeah. Others?
So I love sorry, I'm right here.
Yeah, yeah.
I love the idea of trying to get people to focus more on how quickly they can learn and adapt, that even if they're proficient in one language.
Yes.
So my question is how do you get the rest of the team? Like, as recruiters, I think we all know that what we should be looking for is good people, and maybe not necessarily focusing on their ability to learn. So how do you get how do you get an engineer, a career engineer whose only focus is Java, to be able to think in those terms, right? To think that it doesn't matter what language they can code in, but how they learn.
So are you asking in the context of like a career engineer when they are interviewing the newer generation, or is it just about themselves only?
I mean, even getting them to interview people that don't, like, we have or not just we, but we have teams that they use C++ and they don't even want to consider new grads that don't code in C++, which is, I saw that on there, that it was widely used, and I'm struggling finding them, so maybe you can send them my way. But yeah, I mean, if they know Java, can they go back and learn C++ really quickly? And it seems what you're saying is yes, but how do I get my hiring managers to see that?
Yeah, I think you need to start, so question being like, how do you get people who are entrenched in their old ways to sort of see that, there's this whole new generation of people who can come in and learn very quickly, right? I think you have to start small and create some proof points, so create like some places where there's a little flexibility, like maybe find a hiring manager who's a little bit more open-minded, and then give that a try, and then showcase that across the other teams. I find that that's one good way to bring in change when there's hard to make change, right? Yeah, question?
Actually, I wanted to piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we found is by doing a skill assessment with the team,
Yeah.
that you can identify where you have strong skills and certain language capabilities, And it's a 6 degree of separation type of an analogy, where you bring someone in who has comparable skills, which you can show that people who have those skills can learn a certain language within X period of time, and that you have other individuals on the team who are proficient in that language, and you can set up a mentoring type of a relationship along with a targeted goal. So you are able to demonstrate to your engineering team, based on the core capabilities within the team, that you are able to absorb this individual and bring them up to speed on the desired language while still bringing in someone who is extremely skilled in programming.
I would agree with that. I think I'm going to wrap up here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I want to welcome up on stage here Gaurav Verma, who is our SVP of Customer Success. So welcome, Gaurav. Over to you. Sorry I ran over.
After you, please.
Thank you all.
I don't need that. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for all of you being here. As Vivek mentioned, this is our 9th HackerRank.main event. And I've had the opportunity to host a customer panel on each and every one of them, right from the meetup that we started in Palo Alto, so full circle back here. I know the picture doesn't look like the same person who's been doing this for 9 of them. This is a Gen Xer trying to compete with a Gen Z. Somewhere we got into the who can get to man bun faster. I'm miserably failing. And I don't know, at some point I'm going to have to go like, okay, I just call it a spade a spade. I cannot compete with a 16-year-old. Let's just move on, right? So we'll eventually get there. But in every one of these customer panels, one question that we've debated, talked about, has been around diversity and inclusion. And it's been fascinating to see that it's top of mind for everyone in recruiting, because mostly we've had the tech recruiting, your peers up on these panels, and it's top of mind, and everyone wants to solve it, but we don't know how, and we haven't made tremendous progress. And so today, having Aubrey with us is going to be really interesting to say, okay, how do you really go about it? And let's go get some real experience of what works, what doesn't work, and how do you get out from being, it's top of mind, but I don't know how to solve it. So Aubrey, thank you for being here. It'd be great if you can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about you, and we'll jump right in.
I'm Aubrey. I'm so excited to be here. So my day job is that I'm the Global Head of Diversity and Belonging at Atlassian, and I'm going to ask all of you for a favor, actually, which is, we'll talk about it, but I'm trying to change my job title, and I need your help. But my job is really to help Atlassian hire the right people and then make sure that they can thrive once they're there. The other way I describe my job is, crushing the hierarchy with capitalism. If that works for you. But I'm really lucky. I'm so excited to be here in particular because actually HackerRank was what got me into diversity and inclusion work.
That's awesome.
So back when I was at Palantir, I basically convinced someone to let me run an experiment on engineering recruiting to be like, it's busted. You're not hiring enough women. And they were like, no, we're a meritocracy. And I did an experiment. I was like, no. And so we ended up overhauling the process, and HackerRank actually was really key to work with us to make it so that we removed a lot of bias from that process. So you didn't know I was going to tell that story.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah.
I have a lot of
Leah from Palantir. Hey, Leah.
Oh, yay.
Excellent. So so every single one of us, there's some form of unconscious bias. I think I'm notorious. I do it all the time.
It's really like how many?
How many, right?
And to what degree, right?
And it starts from the resume. I see the email address in our ATS when it gets sent to me, and I'm trying to decipher like my own email address. Personal one is gaurav.varma@gmail.com. You can infer a fair bit from it, right? Male, Indian origin. I don't think you'll get the hair part of it, but everything else you'll get. And then one, tends to then let me go Google this individual. You go on LinkedIn. There's a picture. It creeps in, regardless of how hard you try to make a conscious effort not to. It does. And how do you protect yourself against that?
I think what you do is you have to do really smart systems design. So the fact is, you know that you could throw resumes on the floor and pick up half of them and interview those candidates, and you'd have the same success in job performance as if you scanned resumes.
Wow.
Yeah, literally the number one thing about resumes that predicts whether someone gets an onsite is like typos on it. So like resumes are useless. I genuinely think so. But I think that's it. You have to design your processes to limit the potential expression of your bias, because we're human, like our brains physiologically can't not be biased. because we've learned a lot of roles about people. So if you can get rid of resumes, awesome. If you can use tools genuinely like HackerRank to do any kind of skills testing as opposed to deciding something else. Or if you're not at the point where your organization can get rid of resumes, right? We have to do a little more stakeholder management. Thinking about ways to read them that are more structured. So it's, don't look for experience working at Google. Why? Because they've had historically highly discriminatory hiring processes, right? And I don't want to call out just Google, like the entire industry. Google just has a lot of employees. And so if you're looking for signs that someone has had a lot of money, like go hire someone from Stanford. Go hire someone who went to Google or Facebook. I did go to Stanford, so I think that's it. And there are a lot of smart people there, but there are a lot of people that are just rich there too. And I think that's important to know. So when you're looking at a resume, especially for a university student, is that student have a 2.8 GPA, but did they work an extra job because they had to support family at home? Because students of color are significantly more likely to have to be like that. And when you have a 3.7 resume cutoff, all you're actually selecting for is family wealth and whiteness for the most part because of the way those things move together in our society. So I think we can make those intentional choices. And I think it goes back to a larger point, which is I'm not actually a recruiter. So to do this work well, you have to have incredible partnership with the recruiting team. I'm really lucky that we have an awesome one. But we've worked really hard where possible, get rid of degree requirements. Why? Because you can code without one, or you can code with a degree in philosophy. I code and I have a degree in journalism. Make sure you're taking into account people's whole life story. Like I'd rather hire the student with a 2.5 who had 2 extra jobs than an internship at a fancy company. Why? Because like they're gonna get shit done, right? They know how to solve problems. And so that's it. I think you can also make sure that you're killing the concept of culture fit. All that is an intractable morass of unconscious bias, right? So at Atlassian, we talk about values alignment. And that's isn't just some rebranding term. We actually went out, did focus groups with our employees, identified the specific behaviors that are associated with each of those values, and we now run a highly structured interview that looks for those types of behaviors in their past work. You have to have been at Atlassian for at least a year, specially nominated, and go through extra training to even do that interview. So that, if there's one thing you can do, because all culture fit means is you're just like me. And when we have an industry that's imbalanced in the way that it is, that just repeats those things. And so it's not that, that interviewing for people who are going to work well in your environment is bad. That's actually really great, right? But you want to be very intentional and specific about what things you're looking for versus what you're not. Otherwise, it just becomes who rode crew with the interview at Princeton.
I have a crew member at home, so I'll remember that one.
No, that little quip actually comes from a study that showed that in finance, if you played the same sport as your interviewer, you were 4 times more likely to get another interview. And right, something like crew or whatever, there's very strong socioeconomic components to what types of sports you tend to play.
Yeah, I think mine does bring some diversity to the
there's
crew
a question
panel.
over here.
Yes.
Sorry, there are no rules, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't know there was if there was a question time. But would you be discriminating against a hardworking child from a rich family who happens to be in Stanford? I mean,
No, not if you have a conscious set of criteria. But why are you going to give the Stanford kid an extra look over a kid who went to Arizona State? Yeah, so I'm not saying don't hire people from Stanford. I'm just saying don't give them an extra advantage that the people from other schools don't get.
you could have a very hardworking child
Yeah.
who just happens to be in Stanford, for example.
Absolutely. And so if you're doing the skills test for that, then they would get the same assessment. But I know, at companies I've seen where they literally have separate interview processes if you went to a poor school like Stanford versus MIT. And so that's what I'm saying is, the fact is the students at Stanford, regardless of their wealth or how hard they've worked, I can tell you I did not come from a family with $10 million in the bank. And so, yes, what I'm saying is don't give the kids from Stanford extra benefits over students who went to other schools, because that's actually what the practice is in the current state. Not at every company and not in the same way. But yeah, the idea is you should have the same skills tests for everyone. And then you hire whoever meets the bar. Yeah. Fairness. It's also legal. It's like legal, ethical, and right. But what
that
we
little
know
part.
is, the processes as they're generally practiced now are highly inequitable, and so what we're doing is correcting for that.
Awesome. You mentioned this earlier about title. You don't like the title. So you're not a big fan of the term diversity. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Not a fan is like a really light way to describe that.
Okay.
So every year Atlassian does, I didn't have any benchmarking data on attitudes and behaviors towards diversity and inclusion in tech. I was like, are people excited? Are they engaged? No one had this data. So I went out and collected it in a sort of an international survey, and our team, we actually decided to release all that. Because we're like, oh, it's useful to us, it'll be useful to you. And what we found last year, so I put some like secret trick questions in the survey. And one of the questions I asked last year was, which of these groups are a part of diversity? Here's the fun part. I put all the groups. Right, like men, women, non-binary people, white people, black people, Asian people, whatever. So the word diversity is overwhelmingly associated only with white women and black Americans. Even in Australia, Australians were more likely to say that African Americans were diverse than Indigenous Australians. Like, that's weird. And so my argument is that the word diversity is actually highly problematic, not aligned to the goals that we have, and getting in the way of creating equity for white women and black Americans in the first place. So what we should be talking about is building balanced teams. First of all, like, who's gonna die on the hill of building an imbalanced team? Like, absolutely none of your eng managers. And, right, it doesn't make sense. But the reason it also helps is because it allows greater space for other types of identities. So we can hold, for example, intersectionality inside balance. So we can actually think about women of color who face significantly more barriers to advancement than white women do. We can also have space for that straight, white, cisgender man who grew up in a trailer park, who historically has heard that, oh, he's just privileged, when in fact, a lot of the barriers that he faced are similar to some of his peers who come from other low-income backgrounds, who may or may not be from other marginalized groups. And the third reason I think it's actually really helpful is because I have found that internally at Atlassian, switching to this language has helped us have more direct conversations about race than I've ever seen. So the fact is, like, white fragility is real. And the word diversity is so tied up with blackness specifically that before you even start to have a productive conversation, people emotionally shut down. Right? So balance, the word, literally just people have less hangups about it. And so we're able to actually get into the question of, oh, hey, you know, we've all seen like the hiring manager who's like, I really care about diversity. And you're like, you have hired 6 white women, which is great, but like, what about everybody else? Not to neg on white women, like, right, we know that they also deserve more opportunity than they're often given. And so I think then you go to the question of, okay, great, your team is balanced in terms of gender. In what other ways do we need to work on balance? And then we get to a constructive conversation about this category and what are we gonna do about it? And like I said, for us, it has been completely transformative because people start bringing in aspects of their identity: autism, parenting status, military status, struggling with addiction and mental illness, death of a spouse. These are things that people talk about and write about internally at work and even at our customer summits. And I think it's because we've created space for them. So my boss won't let me change my job title to head of balance and belonging until I make balance happen like fetch. So I'm hoping that you will help me. I only ever use the word diverse when it is very clear that I'm also including people from majority groups. White people are a part of diversity. Otherwise, we're contributing to the idea of people of color and women and anyone who doesn't fit that majority being the other. And we shouldn't accept that there's one default for people, right? We're all the default. So that's it. I'm a secret Latina. Right, you didn't know because my name, I'm like the people who the LinkedIn parsers miss. But I think that's it, is when you say balance, it goes back to this, we all have different perspectives that we bring to the team, but those are fundamentally informed by our identities and life experiences. You can't just say diversity of thought. That comes from diversity of life experience, right? It's the reason that algorithms nowadays don't work for people of color, because the people in the room building them don't even know to ask the questions. Not because they're evil, not because they're stupid, but because their life experience has not given them that knowledge. And like, giving them an hour training is not gonna solve it. You just need to teach them how to work well with people from different backgrounds. Yeah.
That's super profound. We'll take a question.
Yeah, actually, you reminded of an interesting story. since you're talking about the importance of diversity and its contribution to a company. So
Yeah.
I was browsing on YouTube, watching a bunch of CNBC videos, and they did a case study analyzing why Uber failed in Southeast Asia and why they failed to enter that market. And there's another company called Grab, which is a Singaporean-based equivalent of Uber. And it was because Uber didn't understand the culture of Southeast Asia. So then they failed to understand that it's a very cash-based culture. Most people don't own credit cards. So then, Uber didn't really have a way of offering like cash-based payments in local currencies in that region. And also, it's also because so many parts of Malaysia and Indonesia are primarily Muslim. So which means that they have certain religious holidays where there would be an influx of demands for certain rides to certain parts, like everyone's trying to go home, visit their families. So then Uber didn't account for this like cultural context. So then they weren't able to offer a service that accommodated to the local culture. So then, and that was like one of their major pitfalls for the entire region.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? I think there's like the obvious things we think about with like branding. Like, do you have the appropriate range of skin tones, right? Because usually it stops at like tan number 1. And like people go to like tan number 58. And yeah, but that's it, right? Like core inability to solve business challenges is what we're actually talking about. And so I think it's really powerful also, even in the last presentation that we talked about diversity beyond just gender, right? Don't just start with women, you'll never get anywhere else. Like you will never get to anything else. But bringing in things like generational and age diversity is also important because it's becoming increasingly relevant. But the skills that you learn, right? Learning how to, like, I'm not gonna teach you how to deal with millennials or like recruit Black people. I'm going to teach you how to like have very human-focused recruiting or collaborate effectively. That's not group specific, right?
I like the age part. That means I have a few more years to go before I get kicked out.
It's true. There's whole theories about it. So there's 2 basically different types of like human innovators. And certain types of innovators called conceptual innovators tend to have their big breakthroughs in their like late 20s. So this is like Picasso, right? But actually, there's another type of innovator called an experimental innovator, which tends to slowly chip away across their life, and they tend to have their big breakthroughs at about 67. So that's like a Paul Cézanne. So it's the difference between like a Mark Zuckerberg, who like had a big idea in his 20s and thought that only people in their 20s have big ideas. And it's true, there is an archetype of people who tend to make their big contributions then. But so the fun fact is experimental innovators do best when they work with people much older than them. So like literally the innovation argument for age diversity and for making sure that we're retaining the excellence of folks who are later and more senior in their careers, which our industry has not historically nailed yet. Although I think companies are realizing that there's so much brilliance and innovation and talent that's there. I think that's going to be a next big win.
So 67, I got time. I got plenty of time there. I'm good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You've done a lot of research in one of the reports that you had, State of Diversity, which we'll now call State of Balance report.
I'm trying. Yeah, this
Right?
year we're trying to make it happen.
That's awesome. You found that 80% of people think D&I, which we're now going to call balance, is important, but that doesn't necessarily translate to action, right? This is a big one, especially here in the Valley. The report found that the number of formal D&I has shrunk since 2017. Why do you think that is, and how do we solve for it?
Yeah, so has anyone heard of or felt diversity fatigue?
It's okay. Raise your
I'm
hand.
totally shocked. Like, I get paid for this all day. I'm shocked at all of you, and I don't believe you. We sort of quantified this existence of diversity fatigue, and I think that's what's driving it. So we found that there was a 10 percentage point drop in companies who had a formal D&I program, but like a 10% jump in companies that said they cared about D&I. And the thing I offer to you is, like, I would prefer if your company's not putting actual time and money into it, just say that you don't care. Like, no one's gonna judge that, but what you're doing is you're creating a space where candidates can't find a place where they're gonna be safe and where they're gonna thrive. And so I think that's what's happening is at the corporate level, it's 2013 was sort of when this next big wave, Tracy Chow asked where are the numbers, and you've seen a lot of companies pour a lot of money into branding and into PR, but not into the structural change. And so that's why I love talking to you all, because I think recruiters are really the front line of creating that change, which is, why are we doing a team fit interview? Why aren't we looking for people who add something to the team? Why aren't we selecting for skills instead of pedigree, right? Those little choices create more fairness. Because I think also the way that, and I'll put this on me and my peers, the way that we've talked about this work has been really wrong.
Okay.
So we talk about it a lot at the company level, right? It's like, oh, we have 30% this. But like your average middle manager doesn't know what the hell they can do to impact that number, right? Or you're like, empower women. And they're like, do I go buy Dove deodorant? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? and I joke, but it's true. Instead of being like, you should value diversity, right? I say, well, could you institute a no interruptions rule in your meeting? Why? Well, because it turns out that women, people of color, and people from East Asian countries are significantly more likely to be interrupted while speaking in meetings. So you're gonna get the good ideas on the table. Now, does that feel like a diversity thing? No. It's also just a good way to, it's an effective meeting.
Right?
But I think that's it, is you have to get really tactical, because folks don't know what to do to impact the whole culture, which is they can't. They can impact the culture of their teams. And we need to talk about balance, building balanced teams, because your average hiring manager knows how to do something about their team. And if every person made their team a little bit more balanced, a little bit more having a culture of belonging, the entire company culture would shift. But it's not because you're asking people to act there.
Right.
So, and I think that's it. Give people tactics, right? Things like, you know, I'm doing a talk with our security team today who's growing a lot. And they said, well, what can we do to make sure we grow in a more balanced way? And I was like, well, here's all of the things our recruiting team is doing from a structural and a process level. And they're like, well, I was like, what about referrals? And they're like, well, our referrals aren't very balanced. And I was like, well, so you five, and it happened to be a group of men who was sitting to my right. And I said, how many of you have been to women in cybersecurity meetups? And they were like, none of us. I was like, well, why not? You want to go hire women, the women in cybersecurity, go to those meetups, go meet them, and then give them jobs. And they were like, oh yeah, we can totally do that. And again, it was just like, oh, it was not a tactic that had ever occurred. But now so I would say there's that, is give people one job and something to do, because often they will try to do your job. They're like, can I help you source? And you're like, no, we have awesome sourcers. What I need is for you to go build a reputation as someone who's gonna support people. Because the candidate's gonna come in and say, well, what have you done to help build a team where I'm gonna thrive? And the hiring manager is gonna be like, we have a diversity program. Like, no one's gonna believe that hiring manager. To me, a great answer for a candidate, and I can tell you because we got to hire this one. You know, I talked to her after she joined. She was like, you know, the hiring manager on the team, I'm the first woman on my team, and I talked to the hiring manager about it. And I said, well, what are you doing to make the team more inclusive? And he said, well, I've been working with recruiting to find more women, but we've also been trying to have no interruptions rules in the meetings. And this is something I feel really awkward talking about, but I'm trying to be more proactive. That was his whole answer. Like, he did this one tiny thing and I feel awkward. And she was like, I'll go work for this person.
Wow.
So I think that's what it is don't make these big pledges about like, we care about diversity. Everyone says that. It's about how can you do a small thing that's totally within your power, and you should also feel awesome about yourself about, that creates a little bit of change. And then when that becomes like your habit and you don't even notice, pick a new thing and do that thing.
That's great. Yeah, I always felt like, and Vivek and I have talked about this when I started too, it was one of the questions I asked him is, core values, do you have posters about it everywhere? And he goes, no, and I'm going to come join this company, right? Because we tend to make a lot of noise about these things, put posters up and it's on our website and everything, but do we really mean it, right? Like, do we really embody these? It is really important.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what it's about, is like break it down into chunks. You don't have to move the whole mountain. Like, none of us can do that alone. This is a gnarly structural issue that we all put little bits into creating it, and so it's going to take us all just slowly moving and undoing that. But to me, that's more optimistic, right? Like, you absolutely can do something.
That's great. This is really great. This is really profound. I want to make sure that there's time for folks in the audience as well as on the live stream.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Most of the discussion's been around recruitment.
Yeah.
What about internally? We've had some folks get into our HackerRank system and try to use the tool to kind of level the playing field to onboard people internally. But we noticed that, and now there's discussions with HR, should we be doing that? So I'm curious as to, have you seen other companies do that? And is there research or information around that as well too?
Ooh. So the question was around onboarding and sort of internal. So can you give me a little bit more information? So are saying using HackerRank to do onboarding?
Yeah.
Or, so that's not something I'm familiar with. So I haven't seen research to it, but I don't want to, that's probably not a global opinion.
Yeah. So within our company, we have job postings, right?
Okay, yeah.
So internally,
Yeah.
we have candidates that apply. So to kind of level the playing field, some of our hiring people leaders have been using the tool to kind of set up interviews, have them do some coding challenges. To
Okay.
level the playing field. But now that folks are aware, let's have conversations about that. So my question is, have you seen other companies do that, or is there some research around that?
I would say, so my recommendation, I think it makes sense that for any role you have every candidate go through the same process. Like just full stop. One, it's like legally defensible, but it's fair because even if you're coming internally, it might be something where if for us, like if a candidate went through a values interview when they started, instead of putting them through another values interview, we would actually go look at their previous year values rating and their performance, right? And so if they pass that, we might do something different like that to save time, but on the craft or skills, if they're making a move, if we were using HackerRank to assess for that, we would use HackerRank as well. And I think that makes sense because it gives you that craft signal on that person. But it also means that, yeah, if you're internal, you're not necessarily getting a special advantage over someone who's coming external. From my lens, because of the way tech is sort of represented right now, right? It's another one of those things of how do we make sure it's equitable, that each person going for a role is given the same fair chance to compete for that role.
Yeah, we've had some customers who are actually put programs together, and I know Twitter started this, where even for referrals, they're like, it doesn't matter. Yes, it's a referral. Yes, you want to give them white glove treatment. We grow our teams tremendously through referrals, but make them go through the same process, right? Because otherwise you exclude them from the same rigor of, do you have the skills or not? Yes, you worked together before, you've been to school together before, but have that equitable process, whether you're coming internally, coming as a referral, or just applying for a position.
And I would say if you can hide the fact that someone is a referral from your interviewers, that's great. Better is not allowing referrals at all. I think it's really important. So again, talking about the number one predictor of going to a top 25 university in the United States is how much money your parents make. And the average white person in America does not have any close friends or acquaintances who are people of color. Not throwing shade at anyone, but thinking about what that does to your referral networks. It's like, oh, all of our referrals look exactly like the leadership of the company. Well, yes, referrals are a diversity anti-pattern because every human tends to know people like ourselves. Now, there are tricks you can use, which I'm going to give you, obviously, which is that people tend to more easily cognitively recall people like themselves. So every time that you ask for referrals, always follow it up with, and please take a special moment to consider whether there are people who are from underrepresented groups who you would also like to refer. Right? I'm not telling you not to refer the people you referred to in the first place, but the likelihood is if you're looking at a group and they're largely homogenous, they're largely going to, when you ask them without prompting, refer people like themselves. They may, so Pinterest actually did this, and they had a 44% increase in Black engineering referrals, just by asking that question of all of their engineers. So these people exist, it's just that we need to tweak our existing systems to get access to that amazing talent, and then we get to benefit from all the brilliance and innovation that they bring.
It's awesome. Yes.
Hi, thank you. So I don't know if you remember, there was a slide previously that talked about how diversity is becoming more and more important, especially for Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
And across the prior generations, it was 4%, and then Gen Z was about 8%. So I'm just curious, like, to me, that is ridiculously low, that's a really, that it qualifies as an important thing for people. And yet, we know it's super important. We all talk about it. I'm just curious, like, what is your take on that stat? And like, why? I was shocked that it wasn't higher.
Yeah, so I would say, I look at it as when you're thinking about a job, there's a big combination of factors that you're going into it. And so I'm gonna speak for my community in particular. I don't wanna speak for everyone's. I'm in a little bit of a weird situation. I was adopted. So I live with a foot in two different racial communities. And one of the things is for a lot of folks who come from where I started out my life, we wouldn't have the luxury of choosing a workplace that was not hostile to us because we need to take care of our families, and so we choose finances because we need stability, right? Whereas I was adopted into a family where that wasn't a question that I had to ask. I had the ability and the freedom to choose a work environment in which I felt supported, because I wasn't worried, because like, quite frankly, like I'm never gonna be, like if I can't pay my rent, I would be able to get help, whereas if I hadn't been adopted, that wouldn't be true. So I'm wondering if there's some of that going into it, because I think the way the question was worded, it was around like, what is this like a top priority for their job search? And so I think it's probably not that people don't care, but there's a big group of people who would actually be positively impacted, that might not be able to realistically prioritize that as high as they would in a different situation. I don't know how big of a driver that would be, but I think there's that. Again, I also think it goes back to the term diversity. Like if you're, again, this sort of straight white man who grew up in a trailer park, I'm thinking of a very good friend of mine right now, so he's like the archetype I'm talking about, and he would describe himself that way. You know, for him, diversity doesn't feel like it's about him. So he'd be like, I mean, he actually would probably say yes, but like, I think there's that where there's a group of people who actually want to work in an environment with people who are different from them, where they can learn and where it's vibrant. But the language and the way that we've gone about building that has alienated so many people that they're not going to prioritize it. And so I think that's a huge opportunity to show people what that looks and feels like, that isn't just about, while still holding space, that there are people with privilege who should do a lot of work to help change these systems. Say, but we can let you in, right? Your uniqueness, your marginalization story, your intersectionality also matter. So I'm expecting it to go up over time, or I'm optimistic about it. But yeah, I think it's like, it's low. I think the other reason, to go back to a really great comment that was made in the last talk, is that you get more innovation and stuff out of diversity, but people actually perceive balanced environments to have more tension and conflict in them. They actually don't, but we're just more uncomfortable when we're around people not like ourselves. And so I think there might be some of that driving it too. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So Aubrey, I can have you here all day. And I know you're going to be here after we finish, while we're having lunch, etc. So for everyone, one, thank you so much. This was really profound. Thank you for having
me. This is so much
and
fun.
Awesome to have you here. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Brian. Great.
Hey, well.
Hey, Brian. So we're going to switch gears. I'm going to switch seats so I get a different perspective. Okay. So I get to see this side instead of just this side of the room. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. Brian, I've had the opportunity to work with you now over 2 years, starting with VMware when I was still EMC, sort of transitioning to HackerRank, Amazon, WordPress, and now Twilio.
Yep.
So would love for you to give everyone a little bit of an introduction. Beyond that, tell us more about yourself, and then we'll jump in.
Great. Yeah. So I was fortunate to work at Amazon twice. And so, like I said, everyone talks about the boomerang. I was a boomerang to Amazon. And so when we started Amazon, we were using an assessment, right, that was really supercharging our event-based recruiting strategy. And so when I joined VMware, happened to get introduced to HackerRank and Vivek, and became a very big fan very quickly. And so we moved in very, very fast with HackerRank and the partnership. It really, really changed our engineering recruiting very much so that I've taken it on and on to different companies as well. And so the same thing is happening at Twilio today, where we were behind on engineering hiring quite a bit and have deployed it in a way where we actually have more offerable candidates than we do open jobs today, because how we deployed it and sort of a strategy that we're using. And so anyway, I lead a good-sized team. When I joined Twilio, it was 17 people. We're now over 70. We have 100% headcount growth this year. Our business is growing at over 80% quarter over quarter. We will hit somewhere, over around $1 billion in revenue, which is a huge, huge jump over basically 18 months. So our business is growing, our hiring is growing, and so you have to have lots of different strategies to get that fulfillment. Yeah.
That's a graph I want to draw so that we can follow it.
That's Vivek and I were talking about.
That's right. Yeah, and it's amazing. Every time we've met and talked on the phone, I've always learned a lot. So this is great to have you share your insights with everyone here. So you oversee both university hiring, experienced hires, like across gamut. You're bringing in folks that are freelancers, contingent. Tell us more about what you see as, there's very different sort of realms, right? Like there's a very different DNA when you're trying to hire university talent, new grads versus you're trying to hire experienced folks. tell us what you've seen over the course of the years with all these different companies and how different it is and how it affects your process.
Yeah, so I think that the first thing is that sort of a traditional way is the one-off approach, right? And so we interview people, and we're always thinking about what's behind door number 2 and door number 3 and door number 4. And so one of the things that I call it my Trojan horse is using a model, right, where we create a standardized rubric, right, and then we interview to that. And so it was very similar to something it's a presentation. It's data structures, algorithm, coding, design. Right. And then we have our values-based piece as well, right? And so we standardize that across our engineering recruiting, if it's on the industry side or also on the new grad side. And that's really helped supercharge our hiring because, again, we had this approach where everything was artisanal. And it just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. It doesn't allow you to get that, velocity.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, because I hear this often with our customers about trying to create programs very exclusive to by what experience level are we hiring, what roles we're hiring. At some point it unravels, like you said, you can't scale with it, right? So you've got to bring as much standardization as you can.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. So we have this thing called Twilio After Hours, and it's, we really get into the community and really promote, again, our inclusion efforts, very much so. And so we were at one, and our CEO sends me a text message, and he says, hey, I just met with this top candidate, and he said our process is too slow. And I said, oh, okay, like what's going on? And he's like, he has offers from 5 other companies and it's been 12 weeks and we haven't gotten back to him. And I'm like, okay. And so again, it goes back to this sort of artisanal approach. So every single business unit had a different way of interviewing and going through this process. If it was 5 candidates or 5 interviews or 12 interviews. And I said, no, like we need to bring this back down and let's think about who we're bringing in, how we're bringing them in. And so that was a big push for us after I was able to get additional hiring headcount, right, for new grads early in career, actually we call them, because we have not just, I think it was something around diversity as well and inclusion, is I don't like the idea of thinking about just going to campuses to recruit. I think about the boot camps and all these other things, and so we're calling it early in career because it could be someone who's making a career shift somewhere, right? But now their early in career is being a developer now, and so that's why our Hatch program, for example, is very, very much focused on that.
That's great, actually. So tell me more about the Hatch program. I know you've shared this with us before, but this is something really unique. So I'd love for everyone to hear about it.
So it's very homegrown, not from. It wasn't driven by recruiting. It was driven by the business. So we actually had an engineering manager who's passionate about this, and the team's really, really rallied around having this mentor program and bringing people in that don't have traditional backgrounds. And so we do a selection process that doesn't include, coding is part of it, but it's not like the only thing. Like if you think of a traditional sort of university program where they hit everyone's incredibly hard on data structures and algorithms, it's not that way. And so we have the selection criteria and we go through that, and then we put them through in a 6-month intensive program where they get to work in the business units, and we're very clear on the work they're going to do and the projects they're going to have, and it's been very successful. And so what we've done is we have a goal to have 100 Hatch hires by 2023. That was sort of our big goal. And so now we're adding more cohorts and adding larger cohorts to be able to pull more people in from the community, et cetera, to really populate that group.
That's
so
awesome.
It's been fun.
And do you have folks from within Twilio that may not be in engineering that can be part of this as well?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this was the first cohort that we actually hired someone who wasn't an engineer, who actually got a job as an engineer. So it was really cool. They went through the same process, and in 6 months from now, they're gonna be in a dev team. It'll be great, and they don't have a traditional background. So
got it. So if Jawahar wants to open this up at HackerRank, I get to take a test if I want to be your DevOps engineer. Got it. That works.
Well, not just that. Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. The other, as we talk more about Gen Z and a lot of the research that we've done, one of the things that has bubbled up is that 60% of them have said they don't feel ready for interviews in this whole process. How do you see that? Do you hear that as sort of feedback coming in from them and saying, how do I get ready for an interview? I don't know what the process is going to look like. How do you overcome that kind of a sort of a fear about I'm not ready for what I'm about to put through?
I think it's across the board. I think it's across the board for most people, right? So we are trying very hard, right, to create little microsites and these kind of things to give people information to help sort of prep them and get them ready. It's also how the recruiters talk about the opportunities as well, and having deep knowledge. And so we really require our recruiters to have deep partnerships with the business, so they're selling exactly or talking about the technology they're going to be working on. I don't think, again, we have found that just having a bucket and say, hey, you're going to go somewhere in 6 months, we'll see. We actually, people really want to know what they're going to be working on. So we do lots of selling into those business units, and that it just works for us.
Got it. Yeah. We've tried this, and some of our other customers have started doing this, where it's more like interview prep kits, where you're saying, hey, before you even take the HackerRank challenge, go practice here. Like, just go to the HackerRank community, go play around there. We're not going to look at how you scored. That's just for you to get comfortable. Do you see that working? You think with the, like, how do I get prepared really well before I come in front of a hiring manager? It is, after a pressure cooker, right? Even the HackerRank test is 90 minutes, got to get it done. There's a clock ticking at you.
So I'll even go back a little bit. So at Twilio, we have traditionally hired in our sort of entry level, less than 5% have come from early in career. And so when I joined, I was a little bit concerned around, basically the majority of our hires were at this P3 and P4 level, and we had very, very few people at the lower, early in career. And so what we've done this year is, instead of going to the business and saying, you can always write a proposal, we do this thing called, we do a white paper. So we write everything down. It's actually one of our values. We don't do PowerPoint presentations. We don't do keynote presentations. Everything is written. And so we put a proposal together to say, we want to be able to start moving the needle, right, on the P1 and P2, and this is really bachelor's and master's students, and here is why. And yeah, diversity and some of these things are a part of that, but it's really around, like, how do you get general managers to sort of think differently? And so we put things in like a fully baked cost. Right, so if they see, hey, I'm going to go hire someone at this higher level and a lower level, hey, it's actually better, more beneficial for me to hire here. And so then all of a sudden it went from 5% in 2019 to this year it's going to be 25%. Wow. The business is bought in, we're already planning for it. And so we wrote a business proposal, not sort of being a traditional HR organization, we wrote a business proposal and showing what the cost benefits are. And so yeah, something like that is sort of like that next phase. But I always see that as like foundation. Like, I'm just trying to get the business case so that then we can start adding on to it. Because traditionally we haven't had the business case because people didn't pay a lot of attention to it. They thought, oh, well, we're going to hire everyone at the most senior levels.
Right, for sure. Now you've run talent organizations, you've been hiring or building big teams and balanced teams, Aubrey. But they're very strong developer brands, right? Amazon, Twilio, even VMware. Like, there's a massive, like, very, very strong brand, especially here in the Valley. And like, having worked at EMC, which was like, with the whole VMware, I was trying to hire DevOps engineers in the software group at EMC in the East Bay, and I'm competing with VMware. It was like a, subsidiary or a partner company, and they go, yeah, I'm not coming working for you, I'm going to VMware, right? So it was like, hang on a minute, but it's the same company. Like, it doesn't matter. You're EMC, you're a hardware, I'm going to that company. And so what about companies that don't have this strong developer brand? Like, are there things that you've experienced, like at WordPress was, not that strong of a brand compared to like a Twilio or an Amazon or VMware. How do you work around the brand part of it, right? Everyone wants to flock to the Bay Area, et cetera.
It was something you said earlier around, you have to activate like the teams, right? They have to get activated. And when I think about WordPress, they were saying, hey, listen, we hired 9 engineers in 2 quarters, and how are you going to come in and help supercharge this for us?
Right.
Okay. And so we put some stuff in place, but then it really activated the entire engineering team. And then we had to revamp the process as well, right, to get very, very clean. And so the experience that people are having was actually better than it was before, even though they talked to 9 or 10 people. Now it was 5. It was very clear. It was very structured. The talk track was very clear and very structured as well. And so what I've seen is if you have it, it's fragmented, people pick up on it right away and they're like, I'm out of here because the story's not the same. Why did that person, my friend, talk to 10 people and I talked to 5? And so-and-so didn't call me, but they called that person. And so I really believe in, like, if you're going to go win, even at a company, again, the size of WordPress, it's very small. It's 500 people. The engineering organization is relatively small. And to just sort of make that flip, it was all hands on deck. Yeah, cool. Definitely all hands on deck.
That's awesome.
You have to like, get the business to point into that. And I know people talk about, oh, yeah, they agree, but you really have to just get them super motivated. That it has to be all hands in deck. CEO's got to get on the phone. Those kind of things. It makes a big difference, I think.
Yeah, so that's great. So I know there's questions coming in even on the live stream. That's what they're texting me on.
Okay.
But before we jump in, there is you have an early in career program at Twilio that you're running, which is specifically for early talent, new grads that you're hiring, and it's about fostering like long-term career. Tell us more about that, because that's something that I've not seen at a lot of our companies.
That's what I was saying earlier. So I got rid of the university whatever recruiting, and I really wanted to think about how do we create this inclusive environment that brings from all different from different experiences, and that's really that. Because I think about like veterans groups, right? For example, so they have a certain set of experience that then they leave. And now they're like, okay, now I'm going to come into the workforce. And so now their second act is now potentially being inside of an organization. So in career was important to me because it's a second act. Or boot camps, right? That these people have come from other careers. Now they're moving into being a developer. And so I didn't want it to be just a traditional, hey, you went to Stanford, and so we want to be on campus with you, or MIT and Carnegie Mellon. And so now this year, we're really taking a different approach. We're saying we're calling an equitable approach, and we're thinking about all the universities we're going to, and we're actually going to most of the cross-section of, I'd say, of America, even globally, that isn't just the 10 or the 20. We're saying, hey, the HBCU, the Latin, like we're gonna hit my old alma mater, University of Texas, San Antonio, predominantly Latin. And like if we talk about, so you never know what someone looks like. I grew up in I'm Hispanic. I grew up in that family. I was raised, my mom's from Monterey. So it was very different. When people see me, they always think, oh gosh, here's this guy. And I'm like, you have no idea where I came from. And I'm a veteran, right? And so we said, you know what, let's start thinking about these different groups that we're gonna hit to really create this true early in career program versus university, top 20 schools. These are the people we're focused on, and get rid of sort of that piece of, hey, you went to Stanford, went to MIT. And again, we're not disenfranchising anyone. We're just saying that we want to be more inclusive there, for sure.
More balanced.
Yes, more balanced.
More balanced. Aubrey, balanced is good. That is awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's always great. Every time I talk to you, there's like this massive learning that I get, and this is really interesting. I want to see if there are questions from folks in the audience. What would you like to ask Brian? What more would you like to know on the programs that he's running at Twilio or has done previously? No one? No? Yeah.
Yeah, it is more like a boot camp. Yeah, I mean, we take from the community and then put them through a 6-month program to really get them ready to be a software developer. Yeah.
Is there competition internally too between the team who wants to select a candidate?
There is a bit. We do a bit of the selection up front, and so they know the team. Sorry.
Yeah. So the question is was the Hatch program more like a boot camp, similar to a boot camp? And sorry, what was the?
Yeah.
Yeah, so is it more like a internal competition where managers get to pick from the program?
Yeah, and we've done a good job where it's kind of funny this year, we're going to hire 1,130 people. And if you think about where we started in 2018 to where we are today. So we finished out 2017 going in 18 at 900 people. So this year we'll be over 3,000. And one of the things there was okay, we're going to hire a ton of people this year. And how do we build out this program? And so part of my own budget, I actually gave away to the engineering organization, the enablement team, to be able to build out Hatch so that it's not 9 in the cohort. Hopefully it's 10, it's 12, whatever. And so that was a big thing for us, is sort of in that sort of investment from TA into also the engineering team as well. Because again, it was very much, you raise your hand and you volunteer. And we have to have a lot more structure around it to really create, I think, an even more amazing program. So,
cool. Yeah. So there's one question. I'm going to take one quick break from the live streaming audience. And what they're asking is, as VP of Global Talent, what metrics do you rely on to take a pulse of your programs? What's your go-to health check on all of these programs? Or pick any one.
Well, we do a bunch of stuff. So if you look at just from the TA perspective, I always think about are like our interview to offer ratios, right? Acceptance rates. I know people talk about acceptance rate, but interview to offer ratio is very, very important to me. Because I know that you can always flood the funnel with anything, but when you're sitting down with the business, and if I use on the engineering side, if you're at 7 or 8 to 1, and then other organizations at 3 to 1, what's the difference? What's going on there and why, right? And so I always sort of double click and diagnose why is there such a large discrepancy between one interview ratio to another? And so that's one of the big ones that I look at. We've got a host of them, right? So I mean, we do a capacity planning model, right, for all of our recruiter. I mean, like we have a dashboard that we show at every business plan or every QBR. But yeah, I don't know if you want to go.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's it, you know, what is the 2 or 3 measures that, you know, metrics that you look at? You probably have a dashboard. Like, if I give you a magic wand, what would you want on your dashboard?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's even for me, we sit every week we do a people metrics review every week at our executive team. And we're looking at a lot of different things, and we're not just thinking about sort of US-based hires. So we have a goal as well this year to move 40% of our hires outside the US, and it's not so much around saying, oh, it's really thinking about how do we get the best talent in the world, not just saying the best talent is only here in the Bay Area.
Right.
And so we're really pushing very hard to think about outside that, and that's one of those metrics we look at often and how we're tracking towards it.
That's great. That's great. There was a question here.
Yeah, a couple real quick questions. So for you, and I've done some of these programs. I'm actually looking at doing one right now, so this is really helpful to me. First of all, for your early in career, you know, type of a program, how did you fund it? Was it individually funded, or was it funded as a big group? Did the different groups have to provide headcount? How did you plan for it? The second thing is, after they get in, they go through the program. How do you measure quality of hire? And third, do you include a mentoring program so that they have continued success after the program?
Yeah. So the TA stuff is funded by us. Obviously, that piece is funded. The business is actually, they have to own the headcount piece of it. So it's not a separate thing. And I know that a lot of organizations, right, they'll ring fence it and say, okay, early in career, it's over here, and it's separate from the rest. And so we don't do that. What was the other one? Quality of hire. Yeah, so we're actually running this new survey. So, and we just kicked it off, because we're always thinking about at that 90-day mark, right? You think about talent review and all these other things that happen. And so we're calling it a net quality of hire score. And so here's how I kind of came up with it, and I've read about it as well as someone else doing it, is at 90 days, is the job as advertised? And then you ask the same question to the hiring manager, this person that you interviewed, right, basically as advertised as well. And so you're trying to just see where, because a lot of times what happens is people join companies and take roles that weren't as advertised, or the hiring manager interviews and there's a defect or misfire there as well. And so, like, how do you start tracking where there's potentially an opportunity to help in your interview process? Is it the manager not writing an effective job description and all these things? And so that's something we're rolling out, where we'll send out one to the hiring manager and one to the employee at 90 days to be able to do that.
And you're the third part of the question.
Aftercare, so do you have any kind of a mentoring program?
We do.
Something that takes them through the, okay, perfect.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, that 6 months is really, it's a close relationship with that new grad, or with someone who's coming in through one of the boot camps as well, very much so. Yeah.
You're with 8x8? I just saw the book. Yeah, we need to have Jim connect with Brian, I think. That's how you'll get the funding for your program, is he needs to listen to this one.
It's actually being run through HR. It's a whole different model. Every company's different. Figuring it out as we go.
Yeah. Great. Another question?
Just in thinking about like growing and like smartly and trying to grow from people with career changers, people who are veterans, is there a certain way to balance expectations of bringing them on? I know it's always difficult, not only like financially, they're looking at people who maybe they don't identify with like generationally, and I know that I've experienced problems in trying to bring on people who are career changers. Is there some way that you've seen to make them feel like united and accepted, even though they don't necessarily see people around them who they're identifying with?
Yeah, and we've done a lot of work with like these ERG groups, right, to really help. And so I'm actually the executive sponsor of the veterans one at Twilio, and it's really trying to, how do you get back into those communities and really help We have a very interesting culture. Like I feel like it's very much people want to help each other out. And so when we have new people come in, it's like everyone jumps in and really tries to onboard folks, right, and get them sort of pointing in the right direction. And so I know that it happens, it's more organic than it is a formal program. But then we also have our ERGs that really sort of help with that. And again, I know because I'm a sponsor of one of those as well. Yeah. Cool.
I'm going to ask you a meta question. I'm also biased, so I know how lucky you are to get to work with LaFawn Davis. If y'all don't know, she's one of the best DNI practitioners. Oh. So, meta question for you, because I think it'll be useful for folks in the audience. So I know that you have the luck to work with LaFawn Davis. If you don't know, she's one of the best DNI practitioners in the entire industry. But actually, one of the keys to sort of hiring the best, building a balanced team, is actually making sure you're doing that with your organization. So I'd love to know from you, how do you think about building a talent acquisition organization that reflects the org you want to build? And then the metric I always use is like, how many job offers have you given to women of color, like as my metric of if you have balanced hiring? But yeah, just for the folks in the room, how do you think about making sure that your team is reflecting those balanced outcomes that you want for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking about the demographic of my own team, right? I mean, I think we're at, if I remember correctly, because LaFawn actually just gave us the data, I think we're like almost like 56, 57% women on the team, and the other half are men. You know, I would say as a cross section, we really focus on a few different areas, and so you know, we're at 32% women across the entire company today, which is relatively high, I think, in the Valley, and it's a big deal. And our URP number, I think we're at 19%, and that really is focused on women, Latin, and Black, right? And so. Yeah, I would say, like, if I think about our team today and the folks that are out talking to potential candidates, to me it feels like a very diverse group. And it's not just people who are 20, 25 years old, right? I'm not saying that, but I have veterans on the team who have never been in recruiting before, or to people who have been in the business, who have never been in recruiting before, that are now talking to salespeople and recruiting salespeople or engineers, et cetera. And so it is a very different cross-section, because I think when I build a team, I just don't always say, oh, you have to have recruiting experience to be a recruiter. I always think about where have you come, and I like to import people from the business as well, because they give a very different perspective to the folks we're recruiting. Yeah. So. Yeah. So it's a really interesting group. Like I mean, this is just sort of like on the veteran side. I have a Green Beret. I have a person who actually just passed the Navy SEAL training and got injured. I mean, it's like these kind of things, like you just start pulling these different people into the organization that just bring a very different perspective. Yeah, different life experiences. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really great. Yeah. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're going to be around, so folks will have more questions.
Thank you.
As always,
really appreciate it. Thanks, man. It's great to meet you.
Yeah.
Right.
I go up there.
All right. So everyone still awake? Everyone awake? Okay. Good. Okay. So we're going to. So this will be the session between. This will be the last session between now and lunch. So it's a big ask from us. So we're going to wrap up with a fireside chat with Gail. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you.
Like, good to see you.
Good to see you.
You know, it's been a while since we met, and I don't know if you remember. We started HackerRank as I would almost call it a first company. It was called Interview Street. We used to do mock interviews. That's how we got started. So let's say you had an interview call with Google. You could come onto our site and attend a mock interview with an ex-Googler to get an understanding as to how the real interview worked. And I think you were doing mock interviews. Yep. Are you still doing it?
It's not a core part of the business, but we still have a team that does.
Yeah. I remember the email. This was 9 years back.
Oh, my.
Hi, Gail. Vivek here. I have no idea why I said Vivek here. It's like me. I am doing mock interviews. So are you. Can I have an interview? And the U was the letter U, not even YOU. And it's amazing that he actually responded. So we actually have an interview with Gail 9 years back on Interview Street. My email etiquette has improved a lot.
Okay, I do remember that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming. So your website, Gail.com, you describe yourself as, by the way, that's a really cool domain name, Gail.com. I don't know if you've ever checked out Vivek.com.
Not the same?
So Vivek.com. The website says, I've received numerous queries by other Viveks of the world asking for what I'm doing with this domain. Well, as you may have guessed, my name is Vivek, so I decided to keep this domain. I received too many requests, a lot of them from me, so please don't waste your time. So that's Vivek.com, so I ended up getting rvivek.com. But it's really cool. You have Gail, and you describe yourself as founder, consultant, coder, author, speaker. There's a lot of things you do. Maybe to the audience, you could just give a quick overview of all the things that you do.
Sure. So my background, I actually come from engineering. So I joined Google in 2005. So during a time of fairly rapid growth, and did, coding there, software engineer, but I also got brought in pretty quickly into doing lots of interviewing, got brought into the hiring committee, and so looked at a ton of packets. And I already, I'm an engineer, so I always had a bunch of little side projects that were kind of just for fun to code. But one of the little projects I started actually in college to some extent was a little website about just the interview questions I was asked, and actually got an angry note from Google about a month before I was joining about you need to take down this stuff. It's like, oops. But when I was at Google, started building up the website a little bit more and allowing people to contribute their own questions. And then when I left Google, I started focusing more and more on this, little side project that became a lot more significant. Started playing around with how to make money off it. Started doing mock interviews, which then you stumble across the same thing. And we both kind of stumbled.
It doesn't make any money.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't.
Completely pivoted.
It's not a good business model, by the way. Or at least I didn't really want to make it work. But since then, I still have that website, which has turned into a real thing, Career Cup. And I started focusing on how to get candidates ready, and wrote a little book that turned into Cracking the Coding Interview, which is actually a major book for software engineering, but also actually Amazon's best-selling interview book overall. So that's a lot of kind of what I got started doing, was helping candidates on candidate prep, and doing a lot of talks around, here's how you get ready for interviews, here's what interviews are about, here's what interviewers are looking for. And now I do some of that as well, but I do a lot of work with companies of all sizes to help them structure kind of the other side and all the work on the hiring process. So how do you structure a hiring process, especially around engineers, rolling out interviewer training programs. So working with companies, some very small companies, but a lot of mid-size and larger tech and non-tech companies doing their interviewer training programs.
Got it. That's interesting. So in a world that's let's say free of all constraints, what would an ideal interview process look in your view?
So totally free of all constraints. I think there's a lot of people who go to this model of the best possible thing would be to have someone come in for a week or two and work alongside us, and that's going to be the best predictor. And that's unrealistic for the vast majority of companies, because you can't just, how do you manage that process? It becomes very, very expensive. But actually, I think that idea is a little bit misguided, because what that looks at is how good somebody is in the first 2 weeks on the job. Well, take a Python coder, put them on a Java project, they're not going to do well in the first 2 weeks. It doesn't mean in 6 months they won't be fantastic. So what you really want to look at with your hiring process is, what are the things that actually differentiate people? And that's going to be things like work ethic and just ability to focus and be committed to the job, not necessarily working crazy hours, but being there when you're there at work. Cognitive skills are a really good predictor, actually, of workplace success, particularly for a job like software development, which is such a thinking job. That is a really, really important skill. And people who want to learn and having that. So those are the things you want to identify in your hiring process. So I think people want to look at those things in the interview process. But I think the other piece that goes into this is that interviewing, that I think a lot of companies miss, which is that interviewing goes somewhat hand in hand with the onboarding process. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of companies talk about interviewing and they kind of miss the fact that somebody comes in the first week or two, they don't get any training and they're abandoned, and they have a pretty bad first experience, and it affects their whole career. Yeah. So among all the companies you've consulted, which company would you rate as, wow, this is the gold standard of interview process? Maybe the exception of Twilio and Atlassian. And also, if you can answer, which company or process would you say, wow, they need to learn a lot? So it's fine if you don't want to answer the second question. I won't name specific names there, but I think for the companies that do it well, I think there's well for different types of companies. what a startup that's 5 people needs is very, very different than a very, very big company. But I think as much controversies as it has, the like standard sort of problem-solving design behavioral interview, if you actually look at it, it does seem to basically work pretty well. You look at the fact that pretty much every large, great tech company, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, all of those, almost all of them have been built with this process. And I think that shows that this process works well enough. Now, almost every single one of them, I think, are doing some things wrong. Sometimes their questions are really not challenging enough. Sometimes many times the interviewers don't really have rigorous training. Oftentimes there's a mismatch between what interviewers are doing and what candidates expect to be doing. But I think that process in general basically works pretty well. But you want to make sure you have training. You want to make sure that that candidates are given training as well, that candidates know, here's what you're going to go through. Candidates should not walk in being surprised about how many interviews they're going to have or how many interviews of what type.
Yeah.
So I think making sure you have that transparency there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name specific companies that do it poorly because that would be a bad idea for me to do and not nice to those companies. But I think the most common mistake I see with companies is too much focus on how much somebody knows about technology. So you have this logic interviewers have. And actually, the question I put out to interviewers in my trainings is I talked about a specific team, that I was talking to, which was hiring people into a team that did Java and a little bit of SQL. So I asked in my training, okay, so what, and they were hiring new grads. So I said, okay, what kind of questions would you ask to a new grad about SQL? And it's basic SQL, selects, joins, et cetera. And then I say, okay. And pretty much everyone gives this answer, and this is exactly what that team was doing, basic SQL for new grads. And I say, okay. Now, how long would it take a developer to learn that stuff? And it's like a couple of days. Okay, so why are we hiring based on this? If we can train someone on something in a couple of days, why are we hiring based on this? And this gets into one of the biggest issues companies have, which is that they focus a lot on how much somebody knows and forget about the fact that a lot of the stuff is trainable.
Yeah.
And that I see common with a lot of companies.
Yeah, and you were okay with like hard questions, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, like a common criticism that we've seen is, like problem solving algorithms, data structures, which is big part of the book that you've written. Has worked really well for Google and Facebook, but hey, that's not my day-to-day job. I'm not reversing a linked list when I join a company. I'm not doing sorting algorithms. There are libraries that are written for it, and we're doing it. How do you reconcile the two? Which is you want to give the candidates the best experience, a real-world experience. At the same time, you also want to assess for their problem-solving skills, which is not real-world. So how do you reconcile the two?
So it's a great question, and I think this is the objection of this stuff isn't realistic.
Yeah.
And what I say to interviewers is the goal of interviewing is not give them a test just like what they do in the real world. The goal of interviewing is to predict a skill. And so the question you should be asking is not, is this like the kind of stuff you do in the real world, but is this predictive of a skill that's useful in the real world? And what I've seen doing a lot of interviewing is that these questions, if done well, which a lot of companies don't do them well, but if done well, they actually are pretty predictive of problem-solving skills. Or put another way, how smart somebody is. And that actually makes a pretty big difference in how strong of a developer somebody is. At that point, whether or not they're like the kind of things you do in the real world is somewhat irrelevant. If it's identifying if someone is a strong problem solver, that is really, really important.
And what are some common mistakes that you see when you say most companies don't do well when they try to create the problems? Like what are the common themes that they actually make a mistake of?
So one of the common ones for companies who think that they're doing this is they think, oh, I'm gonna, Google, they kind of know what they're doing. I'm gonna do the thing that Google does. But they say, but I don't need those crazy hard questions. So they end up instead asking easy questions or really well-known questions. I have lots of companies which pull questions out of my book. And they're like, we know we're doing our hiring well because we just ask questions directly from your book. And I'm like, has it occurred to you that candidates are looking at that thing too?
Did you tell them you're the #1 interviewing book that every candidate is reading?
Okay, actually, this is, and so many interviewers do this though. And so I think that's that's one of the major things. They think they're doing the right thing, but they're actually, what they're identifying is how much has somebody studied. And instead what you want to do is ask questions that are challenging. Easy questions, people all kind of perform equally well on, and very arbitrary things distinguish between people. Ask questions that are challenging. You can set your bar lower, but ask questions that are challenging, that are unusual, and that don't require advanced computer science. So, stick to actually, you can ask pretty challenging questions with really, really basic knowledge. Stick to those questions.
And you would apply that across the spectrum from new grads to principal, or like would you actually stop somewhere? Where does it go?
As long as someone has that, so as long as the core of somebody's job is coding, yes. Now, it's not all you interview on. As someone gets more experience, there's going to be a lot more focus on behavioral questions and design. So it's not everything, but yes, as long as somebody is a coder, you're going to want to have a coding problem-solving test.
Got it. And then like going on this, do you worry that like sort of technical interviews might get commoditized, like maybe like an SAT prep, which is, there are like lots and lots of people who will actually train for you to get better at it, and you miss out on really identifying, hey, are you this well-trained person, or are you really that good? Because as we continue moving this direction, how do you think about it?
It is, and I think we're definitely seeing that happen. And I think what that does is puts more burden on interviewers to look for questions that are not well known. And at the same time, the flip side of this is that, when I was graduating from college, I was never told this is what you'll be expecting in your interviews. And there's a lot more randomness there. Who's going to tell, we're talking about diversity, like candidates who are from underrepresented minorities are less likely to have friends who are coders. Who's telling them, here's what the process is all about? So the flip side of all this whole industry around interview prep is there's a lot more resources now for people from underrepresented minorities to understand, here's what the interview process is about.
Yeah. And jumping to you mentioned one of your motto in your website is hire good employees, not good candidates. I really like that. I thought that was like a good framing of how you can actually do your interview process. But how much of it can you get in like a 2 to 4 hour session on and how do you get better at your interviewing skill? Like, are there like any techniques or things that you've learned, again, like similar to these are common things that you miss out to identify how good of an employee? You talked about the learnability as well.
Yes.
How can you get that out of a candidate in like 2 to 4 hours?
So I think a lot of this is about how the interviewer behaves and actually how you behave during debriefs. So one of the exercises I'll lead people through when they're interviewing and they're talking about a candidate is, an interviewer will say, oh, the candidate did this thing. They wrote this code was bad, here's why it's bad. And I'll say, okay, but what does that tell you about the candidate? And they'll keep pushing on me with like, no, but this code is bad. This is bad code. And let me tell you all the reasons why it's bad in the real world to write code like this. I'm like, I get it. But the question is, what did it say about the candidate? So it's really important for interviewers to ask themselves, okay, so the candidate did this. Why did the candidate do that? And part of that comes in the debrief, but also part of it comes into the interview where you have a candidate who said, here's how I handled this situation, or they write code, or they solve some problem, and really talking about why did you do that? What, did you consider these other options? And really going deep into why something happened and not just stopping the surface level. This was good or bad.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then like once you get the candidate on board, there's the level of onboarding that we talked about. But there's like one thing that we've started to see, and Brian talked about a bit on the Hatch program, is the internal upskilling. That has started to come a lot at different companies where people want to learn new skills. What have you seen work? Because there are like different schools of thought. Like one school of thought is, hey, the best developers actually don't need to have a structured way for them to learn to code. Like you just saw, like most of them are self-taught. They just learn to code and doing it. But then there's another school of thought. No, if you want to encourage, you need to give them a path, saying, hey, you are here, solve this level, go up, and like once you're level 5, we'll consider you for this. What have you seen work? Because I'm a little skeptical on how it is actually implemented, because I don't want this to be like a checkbox that a company does. Hey, we have rolled out an internal learning and development or upskilling program, but actually encourages, nurtures people to do. Have you seen success stories on how people have done the upskilling internally?
So I mean, I think it's a question like, would you rather run around a track? Would you rather run on a treadmill, or would you rather run out on the street? There's no right answer here. It's what's best for you. And I think I think what's important for companies to do is offer a lot of different options. Offer, some people may really like the metrics of being able to do something and then take a quick test and progress in a way like a treadmill where there's metrics. And other people are going to really want to dive in and work on a big project. And so I think just offer a lot of different options. And I don't think it works well in general to have it incentivized at a company. I think that leads to both gaming of the system, and then it leads to pushback from hiring managers who feel like, I have to give someone X percentage extra because they did this thing, and it starts getting a lot of pushback there. I think it's just important, create a culture around that, create time in the day where people are allowed to go take a class that is offered at the company. Give ways for people to learn who like to learn independently, but also give ways for people to learn who like to learn in more social environments. Offer a bunch of different options.
Yep. And then related to this, engineers in Silicon Valley, I mean, they're viewed as almost demigods, right?
They view themselves that way.
Yeah. I'm an engineer myself, so I'm allowed to criticize developers. So I'm going to balance between whatever I'm going to say and developer love. I heard, and I'm not making this up, there's a new grad who last year who joined one of the very well-known companies. I'm not going to name the company either. He got $100,000 as joining bonus. That's nuts. Like as joining bonus. Now it's good that we're taking advantage of the supply demand inequality in Silicon Valley, where you can get whatever salary that you want. But sometimes I worry that people don't realize, hey, by the way, you're actually getting paid way more than you're actually worth. And do you worry that someday this situation will change? I mean, look, there are going to be more boot camps, there are going to be more self-taught developers, so eventually the supply will catch up to it, or people are going to build distributed teams, so it's not like everybody's going to build in Silicon Valley, they're going to build remote. And eventually this is going to catch up. I mean, basic economics dictates that don't put artificial price caps, let the market decide what's the price. That's always worked. But someday when the supply equation changes, it'll be like a massive ego hit to a lot of engineers. Oh, wow, I took a great advantage in these last 3 years. Do you worry about it? And what's your take? Talk to me about that. Yeah.
I worry that it won't change. I think that, yes, developers, if you compare it to, look at the lifestyle of a software developer coming out of college versus that, someone entering software development out of college versus an investment banker. I mean, the investment banker is literally working twice as many hours. I mean, and for pay that isn't actually all that different. Or comparing consulting, right? Software developers have a pretty amazing lifestyle. Now,
in Silicon Valley specifically.
Yes.
They have all the perks, autonomous cars.
Right.
It's the greatest life.
It's a very, very cushy lifestyle. And it's happening because, well, I don't think all these companies are stupid. It is worth it for them. Those people are, that's supply and demand, and it is worth it to pay that much. And the investment banker and the consultant who's working crazy hours, they get to treat people like that because, well, there's a lot of people who want that job. And what I worry about is the dynamics that have happened to get us to this place where we keep needing more and more software engineers, and there's just aren't enough of them in the US. The US doesn't have that many people, doesn't have that many colleges, and we're just constrained. And that's why we're seeing these boot camps, because there are good options for these people. And I think those boot camps are great, and I think that they only help the ecosystem. I think we need more software developers in the world.
Do you think there's the constraint is artificial, that is created by us, which is a hiring manager saying, no, I will hire only people who are proficient in Python because it's in Python stack, or I will hire people only from these schools. Do you think it's a constraint that we create, Or do you think just opening up the aperture or lens, like, no, there's actually not a lack of supply, but because we're so biased, we're creating this artificial constraint. Where do you think it falls?
I think there's a mix of things. I think there are things companies do that make things harder on them. So, for example, yes, like requiring particular programming languages.
Yeah.
That in some cases that's valid, and in other cases that's just making your life hard. Not being open enough. I really liked what Brian was talking about earlier with one of the things I got from it is, hey, you have this university recruiting program. Why isn't this open to people who have more years of experience but are willing to come in as essentially the equivalent of a new grad?
Yep.
Why isn't that open to them? So I think those are really great resources to help solve some of these problems.
Got it. So you're saying they'll still be viewed as demigods for quite some time?
Yeah.
Paraphrasing.
Yes,
Okay.
and I hope again. I hope that we get more software developers out in the world, because I think we need them, and I think the demand is increasing seemingly faster than supply.
Yeah. Just so you know, it really helps our business. So I'm like biased in that sense as well. But wanted to know. I know we have about 2 minutes. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, hi, Gail. Thank you for your book. I followed your book to get a job several times. But what I want to ask is, do you think that this sort of assessment of asking the questions that we do in an interview, like traversing a binary tree sideways, or serializing or deserializing a binary tree, which really doesn't have anything to do with our jobs at our offices, does it create a barrier to mobility or a barrier to entry? Because if I had to look for a new job right now, I would have to spend time preparing myself on LeetCode or another site similar to that before I could start looking for a job. And is that what creates an artificial supply-demand inequality?
So, yes and no. I mean, I think people do spend a lot of time preparing. Frankly, I'll say, I think people spend a lot more time than they need to prepare. You don't need to do hundreds and hundreds of interview questions. That's just silly. Interview prep helps you. What I've seen is it doesn't change people dramatically. Unless there's kind of low hanging fruit, right? That's very rapidly diminishing returns, I'll say that. Does it create some artificial barrier in that there are some people who maybe would be fantastic software developers who really don't perform well? Yeah. You're going to find that with behavioral questions. You're going to find that with any type of interview question. There's going to be some group of people who don't do well in it. And actually, I think when you think about artificial barriers, no doubt there is some, right? Interviewing is fundamentally a barrier, and there will always be some false negatives and false positives. But when you look at wanting to consider people who have different backgrounds, non-traditional background, things like that, fundamentally what this process is doing is looking at their problem-solving skills rather than how much have they done. And so you can actually start considering people who are great software developers, but don't have the work experience to back that up. And yes, it's an artificial barrier, but it's probably less than a lot of these other options.
Yeah. If you're looking to move to a new job, we're also hiring, just so you know. You can come talk to me. All right, I know we're out of time. I've always enjoyed talking to Gail. Highly recommend her book and the website as well. So thank you so much, Gail. Really enjoyed talking to you. Here's a clicker. Do you have the clicker, or are you just going to move it? All right, so that's about the sessions for the day. I mean, we talked about a lot. We talked about the Gen Z movement. What are they looking for? How do you assess skills? We talked about the Hatch program. We talked about balanced versus diversity. I had a lot of takeaways. I do hope that people here have at least like 1 to 3 takeaways that you could actually go and implement in your recruiting process. And just at a final thing, one of the trends that we're starting to see companies move is everybody starts off with building teams in a centralized way in one location. There is a big movement that is starting to happen to move distributed. distributed both in terms of opening up remote centers as well as starting distributed. I was meeting one of the founders of GitLab yesterday. He's the CEO of GitLab. It is 100% remote. They just don't have offices. And there are 400 people, and they're growing to go to 1,000 people this year. 1,000 people, fully remote, no office. And everything they do on Zoom and Google Docs. That's your method of communication. So it's amazing to see like distributed, because you can actually take advantage of talent. I mean, like to them, like the world is a talent. Like, they can get any engineer, any sales, any marketing person from anywhere in the world. And the other trend, it's not yet happened, but I do believe that it's going to happen in the future, is how do you build elastic teams? And elastic teams is, let's say you want to build a new project, and you need 2 front-end developers, a full stack, a DevOps, a machine learning engineer. Let's say you come up with a new project idea. To build this team, it's going to take you like 3 to 4 months to hire, to source, to hire, to assess, and get them onboarded. What if you could actually make that happen in a week? What if you decide to have a project idea right now, and you could actually spin up a team of developers who work on like a freelance contract basis that can actually get you the POC out fast, and then you can take it inside your company to build it more. So that's another thing that we're starting to see earlier. So I would say, like, there's a big movement of moving from centralized one location to all distributed or centralized in like remote centers. And then like, the future is just going to be elastic, which is developers are going to be anywhere. I'm going to work on an interesting project with a bank for the first 9 months, and then with like a autonomous driving company the next 10 months, like, I'm going to continue to work on more interesting projects, and that's going to have a massive unlock in productivity. So that's what we're seeing. So I hope you enjoy the sessions. We do have lunch. There is a survey that you can go ahead and fill it. Would love to get your feedback. And I'd like to do one last thing. This is my standard technique that I actually use in every main event. I would like all of you to close your eyes. I can open, so I know if you're not closing, so please close your eyes. Please raise your right hand. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how likely would you come to another main event? 5 being the highest. So so thank you so much for someone clarifying 5 being the highest. All right, thank you everyone. Enjoy lunch. Thank you everyone for coming.